Hello, my name is Eric Gerlach and I'm the South Dakota State Statistician. I'm happy to be able to again join you for ARMS Phase 3 and visit for just a little bit about the purposes of ARMS Phase 3. Recently, I was kind of perusing the Zoom website. Zoom, of course, is this application that we've been using for many months now to host workshops and meetings. And I was looking for any tips or tricks that could make me use the Zoom application more efficiently or better in some way. And I came across this photo. Now, hopefully, you haven't found yourself already doing this with this ARMS 3 workshop. But if you have, I certainly understand it. It's kind of a data or an information fatigue that sets in when we are part of these types of workshops. And it's not just when it's on a Zoom. Certainly, if we're honest with ourselves, there's been times when you've been in our more natural spot of a hotel conference room where a few minutes into a given presentation, this is what you would like to be doing. And certainly at the end of 2.5 days, you might find yourself wanting to be doing this. So I thought about this idea of information fatigue, and it took me down quite the rabbit hole, and I'll spare you the details of the different articles and things that I read, but it led me thankfully to this particular article. And this comes to us from the mental health side of things. These folks work in dealing with mental health issues, and there was an article about everything old is new again. And there was a very good sentence that I found in this particular article that said, have you ever spent your time attending a professional training while simultaneously realizing that you probably didn't need to be there? And that's certainly the idea where the head falls down and it's on the laptop or it's on the desk in the hotel conference room. If we're honest with ourselves again, as either people who have been in professional workshops on the NAS side or you as NASDA enumerators that have worked for one or more surveys, you probably found yourself sitting there, whether it be on Zoom or in a hotel conference room thinking, I've heard this all before. Why do I need to be here? And the best part of this article is that having those feelings is okay. And it's kind of summed up in the byline of this particular article that these trainings corroborate that we're all on the right track. Now, in the mental health aspect, this article is talking about the fact that if it seems repeated, then that's good. That means that everybody is on the same path, treating their clients or patients the same way. And likewise, as NASDA enumerators, if you're hearing the same thing in workshops, then we're being consistent with the training and you recognize it, which means that you're probably on the right track of understanding the survey program and thus being able to collect the data efficiently and accurately. So that kind of leads us to this idea of purpose. And I'm sure you've seen these types of ideas before, and you probably think this is nothing new. These are kind of like the 3 pillars of purpose in the ARMS 3 program, at least as it stands by my opinion. On the left, you see these graphs that talk about the health of the farm economy. In prior presentations, I've often shown these things, and I've shown them from the standpoint of how ERS forecasts net farm income and other things that point towards the health of the farm economy, and they also finalize numbers that are in the past of where we've come from in terms of the health of our farms and ranches. And I've told you about the number of people that are interested in that information, ranging from big input companies like Cenex Harvest States or Case IH to credit like Farm Credit Services America or Citibank and so forth and so on, of these organizations that provide inputs or credit to our farm and ranch families. Very interested in this type of information so that they know how to structure their businesses in order to provide those inputs or that credit to our farms and ranches. And certainly that should matter to our producers as a purpose of ARMS Phase 3. A second pillar, if you will, is the research done by ERS based on the data from ARMS. You can see kind of these examples of long-term research that they've done in examining impacts of changes to the tax code or examining impacts of changes to our farm program payments. And certainly that is something that ERS does on a daily, if not monthly basis, in looking at aspects of farm policy, looking at aspects of new farm policy and how that'll impact our farms and ranches. And they do that based on ARMS Phase 3, or looking at the impact of already policy that is in place and hasn't been successful or has it harmed, or how it could be changed to better serve our farms and ranches. And all that analysis, again, is done with the information from ARMS Phase 3. And then there's a third pillar, if you will, and that's the research that's done outside of USDA, that's done outside the reports of NASS. And here you can see a tweet from the North Dakota Stockmen. And their tweet was simply that scientifically credible research shows that cattle contribute only 3.6% of the methane produced in the United States. Very simple tweet, but poignant in telling the story of livestock production in our country, because you certainly know that there are non-ag voices that point to these environmental type things and greenhouse gases and things like methane. And they tend to try to make agriculture a culprit, when in fact there is credible research that shows that agriculture is certainly not a culprit. My point in bringing up this third portion is I know that producers want this type of information out, and they want that 99% of our population that has nothing really to do with a farm or ranch in terms of production to know the truth about how we produce our food. So I went and found the article that went with this. And this research article was titled Nutritional and Greenhouse Gas Impacts of Removing Animals from U.S. Agriculture. This is the article that's behind that tweet that talks about methane. Now, one of the things that they found was certainly that it's not a great idea to remove animals from our U.S. agriculture. One, it would do very little to impact greenhouse gases, and two, it wouldn't be great for our diets in terms of protein. But my point in bringing this up is not the results that they found, but everything that they used in order to produce this scientifically credible research. I just took a portion of some of the sources that you can look on this screen of all the USDA, ERS, and NASS information that was used. I highlighted item 53 because right there it is, USDA, ERS, ARMS, Farm Financial and Crop Production Practices. If you have a producer who feels that their story, if you will, or information is not credible for agriculture, and there needs to be scientifically credible information that talks about production of food or production of our livestock and our protein, then this is how it gets done. It's things like ARMS, and it's things like everything else that we collect, whether it be through NASS or ERS on behalf of NASS. These things all come about through the data being available. And so there are some very good reasons to complete ARMS 3, and there's some very good purposes for ARMS 3. But I also went back to thinking about that head down on the laptop, or even picturing somebody in a hotel conference room starting to roll their eyes and become sleepy because they've heard this all before, and I'm sure you have. I want to come up with at least one more reason or one more purpose for ARMS Phase 3, and that purpose is simply for the producer themselves as an exercise in knowing the numbers of their farm or ranch. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Here we have a graph that shows the median net farm income of people who participate in these farm business management programs. There are many of them across the country, and they all contribute into the FinBid database, which is maintained at the University of Minnesota. So these come throughout much of the upper Midwest, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa, and others. And so based on the information in this database, they looked at the median net farm income of the top 20% of people who participate in these farm business management programs. And you can see that in the green line. And they looked at those in the bottom 20%. We can see those in the red line. A very stark difference in the net farm income of those in the top 20% and those in the bottom 20%. Now, Dr. Cole at Virginia Tech University looked into this a lot further and looked at the characteristics of those top 20%. The top 20% had moderate financial leverage, meaning obviously that their debt to asset ratios were quite low. They had strong working capital and a lot of efficiency in their production, so they got a lot out of their assets. But one of the biggest things that he noticed and has talked about that's a characteristic of the top 20% is a high business IQ. And that's a high business as IQ as scored by a lot of factors that Dr. David Cole at Virginia Tech came up with. And here are some of them. Number two, that people with a high business IQ know their cost of production, and they know their cost of production by enterprise, meaning they know how much it costs them to produce a bushel of corn or a bushel of soybeans or a steer or a hog for slaughter. They know their expenses, meaning people with a high business IQ are in a great spot to complete the expenditure section of ARMS Phase 3. They understand their ratios. They understand how sensitive they are to changes. So that means they're in a great spot to know what their assets are worth on the farm, know what their liabilities are on the farm, and be able to record those in ARMS Phase 3. Hopefully you're starting to get a sense of where I'm going here, that completing ARMS Phase 3, whether our producers want to do it for the reasons I stated before, the 3 pillars with the research and the attention to our farm economy and the health of our farm economy, or the research done by those outside USDA, if those things aren't enough, it's a great exercise in producers to complete an ARMS 3 for the simple fact of knowing their operation and forcing them to make sure they know their cost of production, make sure they know the value of their assets and the debt that goes against those assets. And another thing that Dr. Cole has talked about is when somebody's in a turnaround situation. Number 5, they're able to project a cash flow. You can't really project a cash flow unless you've done those other things, that you know what your sales were in Section B and Section C of ARMS 3, and your sensitivity to changes.
One item that producers might need to be sensitive to in a given year is how much of their income came from farm program payments. There is a section for that, and that section, if for nothing else, could highlight to a producer how much of their net farm income was from federal program payments and what their cash flow would look like if those payments were not there.
Important things to think about. And ARMS 3 can be an exercise or just a way to get focused on an individual farm's or ranch's financial situation. I particularly like number 11 here, that you need to know your family living budget. Knowing that number and controlling that number is a big part of having a high business IQ. I know people despise the household section. It's at the end of the ARMS 3 survey. We've already visited with that producer for a long time, and now we get to this coding of off-farm type things, and people have generally had enough. But wouldn't it also stand to reason that hopefully a producer knows those numbers? If they can't come up with those numbers or don't want to come up with those numbers, that could be a sign that maybe that is a problem in their operation. Maybe it's not, but again, completing the ARMS 3, if for nothing else, could be a great way to look at the financial characteristics at a farm or ranch level for that very producer that was sampled for this survey. And people with overwhelmingly high business IQs outperform those that don't pay attention to their cost of productions or don't want to be involved with that type of thing or know those numbers or care about them. Here you can see the top third of business IQ people, their debt to asset ratios, like I said, very low. While the bottom third, over 50% in some cases. The return on those assets, as we said, they're efficient. People with high business IQs for their farm or ranch, meaning they're involved with their numbers, have high return on assets, while the bottom third have low to negative return on their assets. And of course, it would stand to reason that the net farm income of those that focus on their business IQ outperform those who don't. So ultimately, as we get ready
For a new year,
this is a checklist put together by Dr. David Cole of Virginia Tech. And he talks about having written goals for a family, farm, or ranch, their business goals, their family goals, other things that they want to get done
done the next year. But when he talks about being ready for next year, it talks about being ready financially and having your financial statements ready to go. One of those items would be a balance sheet. So that would be December 31st balance sheet of a reference year or January 1st balance sheet for the following year.
That's exactly what we're looking for in ARMS Phase 3 when we complete the debt section and complete the asset section. I look at accounts receivable and looked at other things that tie up those year-end information. Completing ARMS 3 is one step towards moving towards this high business IQ. An income statement for 2020 is certainly part of ARMS Phase 3. And a Schedule F is not an income statement. Schedule F can be used to minimize and manage tax obligations, but it may hide what's really going on the farm. You need that balance sheet, and then you need those costs of productions that we capture in ARMS 3. And we need those sales in Section B for our crops and in Section C for our livestock.
Putting those things together will help project the cash flow for next year.
So this ARMS 3 becomes an exercise in getting ready for the following year. Ultimately, if you ask anyone that you visit with for ARMS Phase 3 what their most enjoyable aspect of being involved in agriculture, they're gonna say something, or at least I suspect they'll say something that's production related. Being out in the field or being in the pasture, working with livestock or working with crops. It's not gonna be business IQ. It's not gonna be developing balance sheets or income statements. We know that. But if that farmer or rancher wants to continue to enjoy the production aspects of agriculture, they certainly would be well served in taking a shot at working with the business side of their operation. And completing ARMS 3 is definitely a good way to do that. If for nothing else, then for their own knowledge. In fact, I would go so far to say as if they don't even want to return it for the purposes of NASS and for the purposes of ERS, that they still do this for themselves, because ultimately, I hope you are all in agreement that we want that farm and ranch to be there year after year and to be transferred down to future generations. And the likelihood of that occurring certainly goes up with those with a higher business IQ that focus on these things. So possibly ARMS Phase 3 might be this exercise in an operator becoming, maybe for the first time, more intimately involved with their business numbers. Or maybe they already do it, and this might be just a check on how well they're doing it. Either way, there are certainly some tremendous purposes, both very broad and very localized, to ARMS Phase 3. And I hope that our producers realize that and can see their way through to complete this particular survey, if not just for us, but for themselves. I certainly thank you for your work on ARMS Phase 3 and all the surveys that you accomplish each and every year. Thank you for your attention to this particular workshop, and I wish you a belated Happy New Year and the best of luck on this data collection period. Thank you.